Okay, so this is the second half of section 2 in chapter 13. Your objectives for this part of the section are to give the basic characteristics of the Amerindian civilizations and identify the area each occupied. You should also be able to compare and contrast the major countries of the age of exploration. Okay. So we know Columbus has sailed across. We've had, at this point, many crossings, but we want to go back and talk about non-Europeans that came to North America, and would be the ancestors of the Native American groups that we have in America today. So there's several theories for how these people came to North America and eventually South America. And the first one, and the one that's been most widely accepted and promoted, is that they probably crossed the Bering Strait, possibly over a land bridge that was formed during the Ice Age. So the Bering Land Bridge would have been, as you can see on this map here, connecting Siberia, so the northern part of Russia, to where we have Alaska today. And the people probably came over chasing herds of, mammoth and other animals that they would have been hunting at the time to survive. So it would have been a nomadic group coming over from Asia. And now there's some theories about that possibly there was no land bridge, that they could have very well made this journey in canoes or boats, because people can still do that today. It's not very easy, but it's possible. But most likely they came from that direction. Okay, so the 5 main regions in North America have different groups of Native Americans, and each of these groups has different characteristics. You're going to need to know these 5 areas, so make sure that you have a place for them in your notes and that you know what is distinct or unique about each group. The first is the Northeastern group. This would be in the northeast of what we consider the United States today. So think Maine, Massachusetts, New York, that area over there. Okay. Sorry about that. The Native Americans in this area will form a 5-tribe federation. You'll have the Iroquois being a part of that. You want to know that they're kind of noted or known, especially in your textbook. That's why they want to refer to them. For their use of wampum or shell money. That would be like when you see like the little beaded bracelets, that's known as like wampum, and they would trade those. And it's really interesting because we can see the movement of different Native Americans and like their trade network and how far it went, because there's shells that we have found in places like the Midwest that must have gotten there from places like Mexico, because that's where the shells were originally, from Mexico through trade, and that's kind of neat and exciting. Then we have the Southeastern, or the mound builders. They're known as mound builders because they would build these ceremonial mounds, and you can actually go see them in places like Illinois. There was a tribe that had a very large, almost empire. It would be the closest thing in North America to a Native American empire that we would have had, and you can go see the mounds that they built. And I can show you guys some pictures of that in class too. Then you have the Plains Indians, which are the ones that usually when we think of Indian and you start coming up with what that picture would look like, that stereotype would look like, this is usually what people think of. And that's Indians hunting buffalo, sleeping in teepees. These are the fighters. Okay. And they didn't have horses always. They get horses when the Spanish come. Then you have the Indians of the Southwest. These are the cliff dwellers who live in pueblos. And I'll show you some pictures of what some of these villages would look like as well. You actually have a picture in your book on page 312 that shows you some of the pueblos. And then the last group would be those living on the West Coast. known for their totem poles. Really, that would be like the Pacific Northwest and going up to like the Eskimos in Alaska. Um, and then just something to know about the difference between how these groups survived is the West Coast Native Americans generally, not the ones in the Pacific Northwest, but like if we're talking about California area, generally were gatherers, um, not huge hunters, um, which would be different obviously if you go up to the Pacific Northwest. They are doing quite a bit of hunting there. But anyway, moving on before I get sidetracked. Okay, there's 3 major civilizations in Central and South America, and these are the big ones. These are the ones that are going to create incredible empires. And the first you have are the Mayans. They're at their peak between the 4th and 10th century. Very artistic, very intellectual. Obviously, you know, they created that Mayan calendar that everyone was worried about. They computed the length of a year almost exactly. They were known for their astronomical observatories. They developed a system of mathematics. So very, very smart people. Their empire is divided up into city-states. If you guys remember city-states from when we studied Sparta and Athens, this would be very similar to that. And they live mostly in the Yucatan Peninsula. And we have all sorts of things still from them. There's pyramids, temples. They created paved highways. So very advanced civilization. Okay, moving on to the Aztecs. Okay, the Aztecs established their civilization after the Mayans had declined, somewhere in the year 1345, around then. They established their capital city of Tenochtitlan. And the Aztecs were great warriors. They weren't great governors. They were fighters more than they were actual like rulers. They had a difficult time managing their empire. They conquered over 5 million people though, and they were known to make human sacrifices. And some of their priests even ate the flesh of the human sacrifices. Pretty gory. Okay, then we have the Incas, who are at their peak from 1380 to about 1570, mostly in the area of Peru. They have very tightly organized communities. This is really an empire. They built roads, traveled, communicated across a great distance. They're mostly farmers, and they will abolish human sacrifice and cannibalism. And then here you have a picture of Machu Picchu. You also have a picture of Machu Picchu in your books on page 314. Okay, so the Spanish come here. Remember thinking that Columbus thought he found India. They're looking for spices. They're looking for gold. Okay, they have 3 goals really, and that's what the conquistador is kind of this mercenary soldier that is sent over here to find these riches, to explore and claim this land for Spain. And remember, they're bringing things that the Indians have not seen ever before. They're bringing things like rifles and horses, and so they're quite intimidating at first. So their 3 goals are to search for riches, to convert natives to Catholicism, and to establish Spanish authority here in the New World. Now, not only are they using guns and horses to subdue the natives, but inadvertently they're going to end up using disease, and that's going to really wipe out most of the native population in North and South America. And there's going to be Native Americans that die before they even see a white man or a European because disease traveled ahead of them. Meaning, like, they infected some Native Americans. Those Native Americans, before they knew they were affected, traveled, talked to some other Native Americans, and the disease spread that way. Okay, so let's talk about some of these conquistadors. First, you have Balboa. He will win leadership of the colony in Panama, who will cut through Panama like a shortcut to the Pacific Ocean, and who will eventually be arrested on some trumped-up charges and beheaded. So not a good end for him. The second, and probably the most famous conquistador, the one that you guys might know already, is Cortez. He meets the king of the Aztecs, Montezuma. Montezuma thinks that Cortez is a returning god from some Aztec legends. But the Spanish will then massacre hundreds of the Aztecs. There's a battle pretty much between the Spanish and the Aztecs. Uh, for a few years, um, Cortez there'll be a siege of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, but after 4 months, Cortez is able to beat them, and they build the city of Mexico City today, on the ruins of Tenochtitlan. And Mexico City will become one of the capitals of New Spain, and the assistant kings, the viceroys, will rule from Mexico City. But Cortez was extremely greedy, extremely cruel. He actually was told not to go further into Mexico from the shore where he landed, and instead of listening, he ended up destroying the ship so no one would turn on him, and going further to search for gold. Okay. Even though Cortez was pretty cruel, Pizarro is even worse. He comes to the New World to find gold as well. He plunders the Incan villages in search. And he'll hold the Inca ruler for ransom, but he'll end up executing him anyway. And he'll found the city of Lima in Peru. Finally, we have someone that's not a greedy man. We have Las Casas, who is a missionary. He wrote works condemning the abuse of the natives. He didn't want the natives to be able to be made into slaves. So he wrote these new laws that proposed that they not be allowed to become slaves. And he felt that men could not be forced to convert like some other missionaries were doing, pretty much forcing Native Americans to claim Christ at gunpoint, pretty much. So he felt like that wasn't correct, and he spoke his mind about it. Okay, then we have De Soto, and I'm just going to go through some of these really quickly. You just kind of need to know their main accomplishment. De Soto discovered the Mississippi River, or discovered, we could put those in quotes because we know that Native Americans saw the Mississippi River first before De Soto, but he would be the first European. De Coronado explores the southwest of the United States, looking for the seven cities of Cibola, which are supposed to have a golden city. He finds the Grand Canyon, though, which if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, you can imagine kind of being the first person to see that would be pretty extraordinary, or thinking you're the first person to see it. Okay, French, Dutch, and English exploration. All of these are going to have very different characteristics, and this will be important to know going into U.S. history. French explorers, the main French explorers that you guys want to know about: Cartier, de Champlain, Marquette, and Joliet. Cartier, he pretty much explores in Canada, looking for the Northwest Passage, which is this mythical waterway that people really desperately, they wanted it to exist, but it didn't, so that they could travel across North America directly to the Pacific Ocean. But instead of finding the Northwest Passage, he founded Montreal in Canada. De Champlain is known as the father of New France. He founds Quebec. And Marquette and Joliet will explore the Mississippi River area and claim that for France, which will be significant because this is where we're going to have a lot of French fur trappers living. And it'll lead us into things like the French and Indian War later on in U.S. history. We also have some famous Dutch explorers. One mentioned here in your textbook is Henry Hudson. He's actually an Englishman who is exploring for the Dutch, and that's why the Hudson River in New York gets its name, is from Henry Hudson. And if you didn't know, New York, before it was English, was ruled by the Dutch. That's why you have things like New Amsterdam. Okay, which is what New York City was before the English took it over. English explorers, you have John Cabot, who's actually Italian, but this is his English version of his name and what he most famously goes by. He's the first European after the Vikings, because if you remember, Vikings actually came here. They would be considered the first Europeans before Christopher Columbus gets here. Anyway, he's one of the first Europeans. He finds these rich fisheries, meaning there's a lot of fish for that industry to take off in uh, the New England area. And so his travels are the basis for the English claim on North America, which is significant. That's why it becomes the British colonies and not the Dutch colonies or the French colonies. So the English are going to be different from the French and from the Spanish in the sense that they're going to try to develop North America instead of exploiting it. I don't know if that's a really fair way to put it, but that's how your textbook's going to put it. So, the French really have very spread out settlements. They're not bringing families over. They're not in it for the long haul. They're just kind of trying to get the most out of the land that they can. Same for the Spanish. But the English will eventually, not here at Jamestown, but when we get to places like Plymouth, will be bringing over families and trying to develop the land. Jamestown's established in 1607. It will eventually fall under the leadership of John Smith, who's pictured here. And this is really stuff we're going to get into next year when we get to U.S. history. So I don't want to go into too much detail here because it would be a little overwhelming, I think, for you guys. And that is read for me to remind you what the bonus question answer will be. And that is going to be Diet Dr. Pepper. Okay, so now we're looking at the other side of the world. We're going over to the Orient. We know the Portuguese have made it over there. You're going to want to know some of these people. I probably won't put them on your unit test, so we're just going to kind of run through this really fast. Pedro Cabral establishes a trade post in India. We have a man named Albuquerque being named the viceroy of Portuguese holdings in the East. Remember, that means like an assistant king, like a governor. You have the Dutch out in the Orient as well. And the Dutch will actually become the only nation Japan will trade with for some time. They establish a settlement at Cape Town in South Africa because that becomes like a pit stop on their way out to the Orient. The English will start to heavily colonize India. And then later you'll understand when we get to U.S. history why it was said of the British Empire that it was the empire that the sun never set because it was spread out. You had holdings in North America and India and England and in Africa, and it was everywhere. The English will surpass the Portuguese in the influence of the East. They'll actually own the Chinese city of Hong Kong for many, many years. This is kind of stuff, though, that you don't really need to get into a lot of details about for your exam. Okay, China and Japan will resent Western intervention. They'll become very closed off. They kind of don't want that Western influence, and this will stay true of China and Japan for many, many years to come. Japan will initially welcome a missionary, the guy pictured here, Francis Xavier, but then he's persecuted. So Christianity doesn't really take hold in Japan, is kind of the point of that story. Here is your paragraph shrink, exploitation, development, greed, SRQ check. List the 5 major groups of Indian tribes in North America. What were the 3 major native Indian cultures of Central and South America? I really expect you guys to know this for your quiz. After crossing the Isthmus of Panama, Balboa saw what body of water and what did he call it? Who gave it its present name? He saw the Pacific Ocean. He called it the South Sea. The person who names it the Pacific is Magellan. Okay, do not forget to keep up with your notes. It's very, very important. 10 to 20 minutes a night. That's all you have to do. Split them up. Watch them on your phone. See you guys tomorrow.